giver.
Oh, yes, absolutely. This morning, I'm going to be speaking about moving from problems to possibilities. And basically, this is a talk about abundance, prosperity, but as Dave was mentioning here with our daily word, prosperity, of course, takes many different forms. Peace of mind is prosperity. Having good friends is prosperity. And I wanted to speak with you this morning because in John 10:10, Jesus basically says that the reason that he has come, the reason that the Christ has come, the purpose of Jesus' works and wonders is that we might have life, but not just any old life. The verse says, so that we might have more abundant life. And I looked up that word abundant, and it comes from two Latin words, ab, meaning from, and under, meaning to flow in waves. And when I was growing up, I had my own special idea of what abundance meant. My mother used to buy half gallons of ice cream, half-gallon cartons of ice cream, and she would put them in the freezer. And I and my three sisters would ask, can we have some ice cream? And she would say, yes, after dinner. And she'd always add, but you can only have one cup. And this worked for us. When my twin and I got old enough so that we could dish it out to our two younger sisters, we worked on that cup business. We got several large spoons, and we would put in a scoop. We all had cups, little plastic cups. We had different colors so that we would know whose was who. It had a little handle on them. And my twin and I would dish it out. Denise and Deborah were waiting expectantly while we worked on this. Mom was not present here. She was leaving this task up to us. And we loved it. We put in a scoop, we mash it down, put in another scoop, and we keep doing that until it was so full that some of that ice cream actually spilled over. And then we realized that we could not get any more ice cream in that cup. So that's my concept of abundance. And when I think of abundance, prosperity today, I still think of that ice cream running over. Of course, in the Psalm 23, the psalmist speaks about having a table prepared, and that the shepherd who's providing all of this then has this individual's cup running over. And it's a lovely picture that I've had from my youth. So for me, combining the two, what Funk and Wagnall said about flowing in waves and having the cup run over, for me, it is prosperity is some form of good that is flowing in waves and runs over. We are overfilled, overflowed in our life. So that's me. There's a story, and I'm sure you've probably heard of it. These two prisoners are in a cell together, and there's just one window that they have to this cell. And one prisoner looked out, and he reported that he saw mud. And the second prisoner, who looked out the window of the cell, said he saw stars. A passerby was stopped and was asked how they interpreted that. And the passerby said, well, it's easy. It's very simple. The first guy who looked out looked down, and he saw the mud. And the second guy, when he looked out, he got bumped on the head, and he saw stars. Yes, okay. And that surprised me when I first heard that, because you expect to hear he looked up and he saw stars. Something inspirational like that. But he got bumped on the head. And how many of us have gotten bumped on the head from some life experience? I know I have. It's not a fun experience. Some people, I think, call it the proverbial knock on the head with a 2x4 or something like that, when life basically kicks your butt. And it's not easy at those times to focus on the good that is always there, because sometimes it seems to be hidden. I was going to share one experience that that I had in 1982. And yes, this was that vivid that I still remember today. And I was applying to Unity's ministerial school. And I had waited. I wanted to do this when I first joined Unity in 1980. But I decided that wasn't the right time. I'll wait, okay, see if I still feel the same way. So then I decided in 1982 that it was the right time, okay, so I'm going to apply. And I did apply, and I got a chance to go down and visit with the interviewers and see the grounds. I came from New Jersey, born and raised in Newark, New Jersey. And so I enjoyed my time here, and the interviews went very well. I had a good time. I thought, I'm in. Okay, this is good. Because, you know, I felt guided to do this. And I waited, and then the letter came, which said, it was a rejection letter. And it said, we're sorry. We'd love to invite you down, but we can only accept 35 students. Please apply again next year. I thought, wait, oh my gosh, what is this? What does this mean? Okay, I felt guided to do this. And then I began to question myself, doubt myself, doubt the value in the intuition and guidance that I thought I had received. And over the course of that year, I did reapply that next year, but over the course of that year, several things happened that made me aware that it was a blessing for me not to have been invited that year. I came home from work, and I was going to school part-time. I came home, and I didn't have any classes, and my mother said, I'd like you to take me up to the hospital and visit a friend. And I thought, sure, I could do that. So I took her up to Beth Israel, and I stayed downstairs, and she went off to find the elevators and go visit her friend. And I was sitting there waiting, and time was passing, and then I began to get concerned about my mother because she was not returning. She had been gone quite a while, and the visiting hours were just about to be up, meaning it was about 8 o'clock now. So I'm really concerned, but I don't know how to contact her because I didn't even know where the friend's name, what room she was going to, what floor she was going to. I didn't even think to get that information. And so I was getting concerned about this. I'm trying to be a good Unity student, okay? Think positively and know that all is well. Then I hear someone over the counter over there. There were some nurses and there were some other people visiting, and someone said the name Banks, and I jumped up out of my seat. I went over, and my mother had almost died in the hallway on one of the floors. We do not know if she ever got to see her friend or not, but a intern had come by, and he saw her lying on the floor, and her heart had stopped, and he got her heart going again. And they said that had she been anywhere else, she would not have lived, because there would not have been time. So, you know, that turned out to be a blessing. And I was able to be there and not be at Unity Village going to school. And so that entire year, I worked with her, taking her to doctors and labs and just caring for her. And it was a blessing too. My sisters had all by this time gotten married and they lived away, but I had the first floor in our family home. My parents lived on the second floor, grandparents on the third. So I had downstairs. And so my mom and I spent a lot of time together. My grandmother on the third floor, on Saturdays it would take them both to IHOP. And my mother had, during the week, I don't know where she found them, but she came up with the strangest, funniest jokes. Okay? She collected these things to share with me and my grandmother, the one I'm named after, Berthenia. And we would have a rollicking time there at IHOP, laughing and rolling, basically, on the floor here. Good thing there weren't many patrons at that time of day. So we had a very nice time. So, and my mother used to fix me breakfast before I went to work. Okay? So these are all the perks of being the last kid home. And I don't think my sisters ever really appreciated it. But I had a good time. But this was not being accepted at that time was a form of prosperity in my life. It was a form of good. It didn't seem like it at first, okay? And it had me concerned first. But there were also changes that happened in the ministerial school. They totally changed the orientation, and they began focusing more on metaphysics. They brought in new teachers, new faculty there, and what I realized when I applied the following year and got accepted, that this was the perfect place with the perfect orientation and the perfect teachers for me. And the other class, and the other teachers, and that theme probably would not have worked for me. So it was good, and it was a form of abundance in my life. This whole thing here, because, abundance is always with us. Charles Fillmore talks about substance, which is everywhere. And that we grab hold of substance with our thoughts, with our minds. Substance is the essence of divine ideas. And these divine ideas are everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And so we have been given this gift of abundant life, and we don't even realize it sometimes. But everything that we need is already in our experience, in our, our cash. We have to learn how to be open to it and how to connect with it. If we're needing guidance, all we have to do is open our mind and heart to that guidance that is within us and all around us, called God. We are the gatekeepers of our own good. The possibilities for abundant living are already placed within us. We have to explore and apply these ideas in our lives. Now, to see stars, as the second prisoner did, instead of the mud, we have to be receptive to the idea that there are stars. If we work with the idea that all there is mud, we could be looking straight up in a night sky with all these twinkly things, and we will still see mud, because that's what our consciousness is filled with. So it means that we have to be open and receptive to see other alternatives, other possibilities. Just like when the sky is darkest, just before the dawn, when a situation in our life seems most bleak, we may be simply approaching the point when the light of the day begins, and we can completely turn that situation around. This new level of sight calls for a change in us, a change in our consciousness. Einstein said, "No problem can be solved from the same consciousness that created it." Now, he should know. He was a pretty smart guy. In the Revealing Word, Charles Fillmore explains that the thinking faculty in us is our creative center. In and through this ability that we have to think, we establish our consciousness and we build our world. Thoughts are things. They have energy, vibration, and frequency. Fillmore says that each thought is an identity that has a central ego around it, which its elements revolve around. Thoughts are capable of expressing themselves. Fillmore wrote that every thought clothes itself in a life form according to the character that we, as the thinker, give it. So, in a sense, then, Unity teaches us that if we have been in the habit of seeing and therefore experiencing mud, to change our experiences in order to see stars instead, we have to change these thoughts, our consciousness, which creates our experience in the world. And some of the main ways that we teach in Unity for changing our thoughts, our consciousness, are prayer, meditation, contemplation, working with affirmative, positive statements about the truth of things, creating thankfulness lists or gratitude lists. Let's see, what else? There are all kinds of things. Some are familiar with vision boards, using the imagination to think of the good beyond the negative appearance. And Unity has been teaching this idea and these ideas for over 125 years. Fillmore, he was a strange guy. Okay? He loved science, and he looked forward to the day when science would work in collaboration with spirituality and religion. He said, I think I don't have that. Oh, yes. Fillmore said that, oops, boy, I'm really off. I don't have it, okay? So card number 6 is somewhere. Anyway, Fillmore spoke about the time when science would recognize some of the things that we already know are part of spirituality. Science now calls what we used to call superconscious level of mind, they call it the unified field. I thought, that's a wonderful name for it, because it is that level of consciousness where we do feel at one with God and at one with everyone. The unified field, the subconscious, superconscious level of mind. And I am very excited to be reading some of the new stuff that's coming out in the fields of epigenetics, of neuroplasticity. This one here, it's neuroendocrinology. And it is having to do with the mind, the brain, and the endocrine system, hormones and things like that. Energetic or energy healing. And I'd like to share with you something from a book called The Genie in Your Genes. And this was written by Dawson Church. He's a doctor. And his field is epigenetics. And epigenetics basically is how our spiritual, mental, and energetic environment affects the expression of our genes. How we turn hormones on and off. We turn genes in our body on and off. In Dawson's book, The Genie in Your Genes, I read something that really made an impression on me. He wrote, our beliefs become our biochemistry, which says to me that what we believe has its effect, not only out there in the world, but even in the chemistry that makes up our physical body. And I think this is what Jesus said also in Matthew 9:29, when he said to the blind men that he healed, according to your faith, so it is unto you. And he said that same thing to the centurion who came to him in the 8th chapter of Matthew because his daughter was dying. And the centurion wanted Jesus to come to his dying daughter. And Jesus he began, but then the centurion said that he didn't have to go. He said something like, because, I'm a man of rank, and if I say to a servant, come or go, they do. And he said, you do not need to come to my house. Just say the word, and I know my daughter will be healed. And his daughter was healed in that moment. Scripture says that one of the others from his home came running to the centurion to tell him that his daughter had recovered. And this was a form of abundant living here for him. In Dawson Church's book, he says, what's happening in our brain can override what's happening in our bodies. Since we are building mental neural pathways with every thought and feeling, we have an opportunity, he said, by taking control of the quality of our thoughts and feelings to build neural networks focused on the transmission of positive, healing, and joyful impulses. As we consciously cultivate mental and emotional states, which then become ingrained in our neural network, we may indeed see, in time, he said, the beautiful world that we are imagining. Dawson Church's book is filled with studies that he and his foundation group have been doing. They have measured and taken pictures of the energy generated from physical bodies, from people who are meditating, from those who are using positive words and affirmation. And so they have physically seen that the energy within us expands and grows when we are working with positive, life-affirming ideas and thoughts. The choices that we make with our consciousness, Dawson Church wrote, are being genetically encoded in our brain structure every day, reinforcing the neural pathways that correspond to the experiences that we have in life. Research reminds us that we hold the levers of healing in our own hands. It makes us aware that it's not doctors, hospitals, acupuncturists, homeopaths, chiropractors, energy workers, or any other health professionals who determine our sickness and health. They can indeed tilt the balance, but nearly not as much as we can. Each of us as individuals, he wrote, creates a big chunk of our emotional and mental environment, thereby turning our genes on and off in our cells. And this, he says, opens up a vast and exciting potential. Exciting potential for new possibilities in well-being and in experiencing what we think of as abundant living. I think it's really exciting. I think Charles Fillmore would be very excited to read some of the things coming out in the new sciences today, because they actually affirm what we teach in unity. This whole idea of the law of mind action, thoughts held in mind produce of their kind. What these scientists are finding is that when we hold on to certain thoughts, we actually create grooves in our brain. Neural cells are connecting, and the word for that is synapses. They are making contact here. And it's almost like if you have a certain kind of thought, say for example you're fearful, and you think a lot about what causes you to be fearful. And thoughts are things. And according to these scientists in epigenetics, what actually begins to happen is we begin to create patterns in our brain for that particular kind of thought. And so when we have an experience again that causes us fear, that gets triggered. Those neurons that make part of that group, they've come together to work together to help us process that particular emotion. And when we come upon another experience that causes fear again, that gets triggered. It's the way that we make memories. We do something over and over again. We drive our car, even without thinking now. At first we had to learn it, we had to concentrate. And we drive mindlessly and on autopilot now because we have worn those particular grooves, and those neurons have started firing and wiring together that work with, she's driving the car now. And so when I'm driving the car, those neurons fire. And I can work on autopilot because I'm working with that particular set of brain cells that have specified for that particular task. It's a very interesting idea and study. So if you are interested, I do recommend Dawson Church. He has a book that came out this year in June, and that book is Mind to Matter. This one is an older book, The Genie in Your Genes, and I'm going to be speaking a bit more about Joe Dispenza's work, his book Becoming Supernatural, in the upcoming weeks. That is a powerful, powerful book. And again, he is talking about some of the ideas we share here in Unity, but from a scientific perspective, and has studies and experiments that they've done to prove how this all works. How do our thoughts create reality? and being able to see the diagrams that they have in these books, which show us how the connections are being made in mind, in the brain, and the neurons then regulating certain chemicals in our body. It's a fascinating study. So, we all have the opportunity to be open to greater possibilities in our lives. Now, we may be thinking that, hey, life is pretty darn good, okay? But you know, I think God always has something better for us, okay, if we're open to it. And I think there's no end to that good. Okay? So, don't limit yourself, okay, because God may have something more for you. So stay open. God bless.